Hello, my name is Vic. I'm 3 years old.
Veer's a real character. He's smart, funny, adventurous, full of beans, and he's very cheeky. But underneath his healthy exterior, Veer's body has been hiding a very rare genetic disorder.
I got anemia. You gonna help me?
This means that his bone marrow is not producing enough stem cells, and so his blood counts are dropping. He will always have a higher risk of certain cancers, but soon he will need a stem cell transplant. Due to his Asian origin, Veer only has a 20% chance of finding a good match. Unfortunately, no one in our family is a match, so now we are relying on the generosity of an unrelated stem cell donor from anywhere in the world. All it takes to register to become a donor is a cheek swab. You have the rare opportunity to save a life of someone like Veer's, so why not take it? There really couldn't be an easier way to save a life.
Community Assistant Team 8, CAT8,
is a group of Jain individuals and professionals
who are assisting the community at large
during the COVID-19 crisis.
CAT8 began just before the COVID-19 crisis,
when it held a can challenge,
where children created iconic monuments.
using cans of food. It raised some 3 tons of canned food.
Enough supplies for 4 months.
for the Watford Food Bank, run by the Trussell Trust.
During the COVID-19 crisis,
CAT8 is helping the elderly, the vulnerable.
Those with isolation and key workers.
with meals and essential shopping.
help with medicine collection.
And someone to talk to.
whilst coping with isolation.
CAT8 is organising webinars,
imparting information and creating awareness.
A range of topics for all age groups.
In addition, we have created
A business and education helpline.
For individuals and businesses that need further guidance on the topics of all the webinars.
we also have a YouTube channel,
A Facebook page and a Twitter handle.
CAT8 is a newest network fibre,
Connecting the community.
CAT8 are very kindly supported by a number of businesses to enable us to carry out our work, and we are very grateful to all of them. Right, now to our speakers tonight. They are Manish Shah, Dr. Anuja Shah, Rajal Patni, and Vivek Patni. Manish Shah is the Vice Chair of Alzheimer's Society and has served on the Board of Trustees for 6 years as a volunteer. Manish has direct experience of dementia by caring for his late mother, who had frontotemporal dementia. The support of Alzheimer's Society to his family during their dementia journey was critical to enable his mother to continue to live with dementia in a supportive family environment for 15 years. Manish believes that the society has led the way in uniting against dementia to ensure there is support available for people affected by dementia, enabling many other families to benefit similarly. However, there is a significant opportunity in accelerating societal change to enable people with dementia and their carers to continue living their lives with dignity, compassion, and with full support like other terminal diseases. Manish, by background, is a senior managing director in corporate finance at FTI Consulting LLP in London. He has over 30 years of experience in corporate and private equity transactions across a range of sectors, including consumer and retail, business services, media, financial services, and health care and leisure. He was a partner at Deloitte before he joined FTI. Our second speaker is Rajal Patni. Rajal has spent over 30 years as a seasoned finance director for multiple businesses across UK, India, and North America within technology, retail payments, and construction. In 2016, she took the leap into the health and social care sector after having poor experiences coordinating care for her father's multiple care needs and mother's dementia, mild Alzheimer's, while she was still in full-time employment. To make a real difference, Rajal co-founded multiple technology-enabled care businesses across UK and India. One of her proudest decisions and working with family, friends, colleagues to bring ideas and solutions to life. Rajal is a co-founder of Maui Home Care, an in-home care delivery business, and a co-founder and CFO of Lavanya Plus, which aims to improve social care outcomes using its digital technology, WeMa Wellness Management. WeMa focuses on supporting informal care challenges both in the home and in the workplace, and matches service users with the most appropriate providers, meeting their needs using its proprietary technology platform. Rajal, by background, is a fellow of the Chartered Association of Certified Accountants and volunteers as the resident representative for North London Partners STP Digital Board, as well as volunteering at the Barnet Asian Women Association charity. She is an angel investor and enjoys mentoring young startups. Dr. Anuja Shah is a general practitioner with over 20 years of experience. She is a GP partner at the Wheatfield Surgery in Luton, and she is also a GP trainer. Anuja is a palliative care lead and has special interests in dementia, diabetes, and women's health. She is also a primary care network lead. Finally, Vivek Patni. Vivek is the co-founder and CEO of Lavanya Plus. Having studied biomedical sciences in King's College, London, and a working background at Deloitte, Vivek brings passion, innovation, commercialization, structure, and compliance into Lavanya Plus. 6 years ago, whilst looking after his grandfather, Vivek realized his passion to make a change in social care. Navigating between the local authority, GP, and NHS systems to manage his grandfather's multiple daily care and medical needs was challenging, especially as he was also taking care of his grandmother who lives with dementia. Vivek and his co-founders came to recognize key areas in the care pathway that needed the most attention and would support service users the most. WeMa is supporting individuals and their family and their families accessing the right care, service providers improving service deliveries, corporates to look after their employees, and in the public sector to create a more efficient service. So without further ado, over to Manish, please.
Thank you, Rumit. Welcome, everybody. And as Rumit's outlined already, this is one of the first one of the Demystifying Dementia sessions. So this one will be an introductory session around dementia, and next week we will cover some of these topics in a bit more detail. I promise you that you will know more about dementia at the end of this session, and I hope you will appreciate what someone with dementia faces on a daily basis. So Rumit has already kind of in the introduction given you a glimpse of why I'm doing this today. So about 15 years ago, my mom was initially diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease which was quite a surprise to all of us, and also subsequently that diagnosis was corrected to frontotemporal dementia. And this was when she was in her mid-60s. As you can imagine, this was a big shock to all of us and a bewildering time for all of us, given that we had no other knowledge of dementia at that time. So as a family, we went from knowing nothing about dementia to developing a very deep understanding of what is dementia. How does it progress? How can you care for somebody with dementia? Mum was looked after at home by my father for all of this time with the family support, except for the last few months when she was admitted to a care home. What she did not fully understand and she was unable to do all the time was particularly frightening and frustrating for her, I can imagine. I mean, she loved cooking sweet and savory treats during family events, participating in family functions. But of course, all of those things slowly and gradually diminished as her dementia progressed. Sadly, none of the doctors or clinicians really told us about what to expect and how the disease would progress and how we could support Mum through her life. However, Alzheimer's Society was instrumental in supporting our family at various stages of our dementia journey and enabled our family to structure the care for Mum so that she could live as well as she could do. I wanted to support the charity and do more for other families who may be going through what we went through. So that's the reason why I'm here today, and that's why I'm now the vice chair of Alzheimer's Society, and I've been with the organization for over 6 years now. So let me give you a bit of context before we get into the meat of what dementia is all about. The numbers are quite staggering, actually. There are 850,000 people living with dementia in the UK. Typically, each person would have around 10 or more people around them, including their spouses, children, grandchildren. So around 10 million people in the UK are touched by dementia. So I can understand the reason why you may have joined this webinar is because someone that you know is touched by dementia or affected by dementia, or you may be concerned about it. Globally, there are over 50 million people who have this condition, and it is growing rapidly. So a number which is going to grow to 80 million by 2030 and 150 million by 2050, according to The Economist. These are truly staggering numbers. Further context, I suppose, should be placed given the recent COVID crisis. So what has happened during the recent and ongoing COVID-19 crisis has been a real tragedy for those people who are affected by dementia. Alzheimer's Society has been instrumental in raising this issue with government and the public. More than a quarter of all those who have died with COVID-19 had dementia. In care homes, the picture is even bleaker. About half of all the deaths in care homes have been those who had dementia. The impact of social isolation, as you can imagine, cannot be underestimated during this very strange time that we're going through, and especially during lockdown. Many people with dementia lose their cognition and communication skills if they're unable to maintain social contact with their family members and friends. The toll on carers has also been devastating during this crisis. So that's just giving you a bit of context around what this particular condition is doing to people and how we need to address this. So let's jump into it. Nirmal, shall we go through to the next slide, please? So a quick exercise, as Rumit has indicated, this is where your chat box or chat functionality comes into play. So what's the first word that you think of when you hear the word dementia? If you can put that into the chat box, that would be great. I'll give you a few seconds to put that in. So Nirmal, let's go to the next slide and I'll go through how we have experienced this in the past. So yeah, just run through. So these are some of the words that people use when they describe dementia. And, you know, we will collate many of the words that you have used, and we'll pull that up at the end of the session before we close off. So a lot of the words that you were sort of saying are fairly negative, which is not surprising, given that's how, you know, society has come to view dementia. However, it's quite important that we change the perceptions of people and especially address the fear and stigma of dementia. Now, the stigma of dementia is a particularly important point to discuss, and let me just explain in a bit more detail. When Mum was living with dementia, we took her to many social events, and during that time, we were often met with strange comments from friends and family, and they were concerned why we had brought Mum to these events, and they would often say to us, why don't you leave her at home? Why have you brought her here? But for us as a family, we did not want to hide away from dementia. We were very explicit in explaining to people what her condition was. She was a person, and she was an integral part of our family. And just because other people felt uncomfortable, that should not stop us from keeping her involved and continuing to be part of our lives. This is what I mean about changing perceptions of those around us. The other aspect, which is also quite telling, is that dementia is often deemed to be a taboo subject, especially in Indian, Asian societies. Hopefully it's changing, but it's going to take some time. But also the word itself hasn't really got a common translation into Gujarati, Hindi, or other languages in common usage, shall we say. As such, many families do suffer in silence, and those who are affected by dementia do not get the help that they desperately need. Let's go to the next slide. So what we're going to do today is run through a series of slides which will give you an understanding of the program that Alzheimer's Society has created, which is called Dementia Friends. Now, Dementia Friends is a social action movement. It's led by the Alzheimer's Society, and during the course of this presentation, you will understand 5 key messages, and hopefully as a result of all of this, we are able to create a dementia-friendly community. There are currently around 3.3 million dementia friends in the UK, and that number is growing. So we'll talk about what commitments you can make at the end of the session, but it'd be helpful to go through what are these 5 key messages. So yet another activity for you. So this is a simple one, fill in the blanks. So again, just jot them down in the chat box, or discuss it amongst your family if you have them gathered with you, and we'll pull up the what those words mean. So dementia is not a natural part of. Right, Nirmal, shall we go to the next slide? Yeah, continue on. So dementia is not a natural part of aging. It is caused by diseases of the brain. It is not just about losing your memory. You can live well with dementia. And there is more to the person than the dementia. And this is particularly important, the last point especially. So in order to go through this in a bit more detail, let me pass on to Dr. Anuja Shah, and Anuja can take us through what each of these 5 key messages are about. Anuja, over to you.
Thank you, Manish, for the fantastic introduction. I think already it's inspiring people to know more about dementia. Dementia affects 1 in 14 people over the age of 65. By the time we're 85, it affects 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 people. Does this mean that it's normal to have dementia when you're older? Is it a natural part of aging? No, it's not a natural part of aging. Our body undergoes many changes as part of aging. For example, we have gray hair and we have wrinkles, but dementia is not part of aging. But some memory problems can be normal after 65. 40% of people say that they have some memory impairment after the age of 65, but that doesn't mean that they have dementia. We all sometimes have lapses of memory. For example, we may forget where we've placed our keys, or we may forget conversation that happened a year ago. But when this starts affecting your day-to-day life, then it could be dementia. For example, if the person consistently forgets things, or if they forgot a conversation that happened in the morning, that's something different, that's serious, and that could be dementia. Dementia is a result of physical disease that damage the brain. Next slide. So our brain is an intricate network of brain cells, nerve cells, and blood vessels. And if there's any damage to the brain cells, the cell dies and loses its function. And as a result, the brain activity obviously reduces. Now, in dementia, this is a progressive phenomenon. And over time, the brain function reduces and the brain actually shrinks. Now, depending on how this happens, the different types of dementia are defined. Next slide. So a lot of people get confused between the term dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Let me just make it a little bit, clarify it a little bit. So dementia is an umbrella term, and under which you have more than 100 subtypes. Alzheimer's disease is one of the biggest cause of dementia. It is one of the biggest subtype of dementia. And you can have other subtypes of dementia, such as dementia with Lewy body or vascular dementia and frontotemporal dementia. These 4 form the bulk of the dementias. But as I said, there are several hundred other types. In Alzheimer's disease, the damage that happens to the cells is that certain proteins are deposited in the cells, causing the cell to die, and eventually this is a progressive phenomenon. So more cells keep dying, and hence this causes shrinkage of the brain. Vascular dementia, the blood vessels which carry blood supply to the brain are actually damaged and blocked. This causes blockage in the arteries, and hence the blood supply to the brain cells is decreased, and the brain cell dies. Vascular dementia occurs after a stroke or a series of strokes, and hence with vascular dementia, it is almost like a stepwise deterioration where the person has sudden onset of dementia after a stroke, is stable for a number of years, and then has another stroke and a sudden dip, rather than having a gradual deterioration. Dementia with Lewy body, a similar kind of pathology again, where this protein which consists of Lewy bodies is actually deposited in the brain cells and in certain part of the brain, causing very much like Parkinson's-like symptoms, along with the memory loss. And frontotemporal dementia is when the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe of the brain are affected, and these lobes mainly control our speech and our personality, and that's what's affected in this particular type of dementia. Next slide. So who is at risk? We've just discussed that increasing age is a big risk factor. So as we get older, the chances of us getting dementia are greater. Now, you may wonder, my mom had dementia. Does that mean I'm going to get dementia? Actually, it very rarely runs in families. And the rare dementia that runs in family normally starts at a very young age. So on the whole, it is not, it doesn't run in families, but it may appear to do so, because if as a family you live longer, you're probably more likely to get dementia. So if long life runs in the family, dementia may run in the family, if that makes sense. Smoking, uncontrolled diabetes, and uncontrolled hypertension are risk factors for dementia. And these are all the same risk factors as for cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So it's a very good idea to lead a very healthy life, exercise regularly, try and make sure that your blood pressure and your diabetes are under good control, and obviously give up smoking. Those with limited education also tend to suffer dementia. Next slide. So is dementia just about losing your memory? I think those of us who have family members who have had dementia, we know that actually we lose the person that we knew. We lose the person, everything that makes that person, their emotions, their personalities, their hopes and fears. Next slide. So depending on which part of the brain is affected, you have your symptoms. So if the frontal lobe is affected, which actually controls our speech, you have problems with finding words, fluency of speech, forgetting how to put words together to form a sentence, so on and so forth. Next slide. So motor skills. So depending on part of the brain that is affected, you may have problems with even putting a fork and knife together, and even spooning your food. You may have problems with sequencing. So you may not remember how to dress in a sequence. So you may put your trousers before your underwear. Things like that, which are obviously very common sense for everybody, but they find it difficult to remember that sequence. Changes in inhibition. So someone who's a very shy person may suddenly become outgoing. Visual perception. So a black mat may appear to be a big black hole, and they may have a fear of going over this black mat. Communication, as discussed, putting words together to form a sentence may become difficult, and they may have problems finding words and asking for things, and normal day-to-day conversation can become very difficult. Next slide. So what are the early signs of dementia? How do we recognize dementia? Is that occasional lapse in memory? Could it be dementia? No, it is consistent forgetfulness. So it is when you forget things all the time. You forget names of loved ones. Versus forgetting name of an acquaintance, which could be a normal lapse of memory, for someone who is maybe under stress or depressed. But if you're forgetting names of your family members, that's not normal. If you're wondering, if you're losing your way around a very familiar place, that's dementia. That's not normal. Insomnia or even hypersomnia or sleeping too much could be one of the early signs of dementia. Thrown off by a change in routine. Patients with dementia like their routine, and if you change any of their routine, they get very confused. They can even become agitated and aggressive. Misplacing things, like putting the car keys in the bathroom. Things like that are very not normal. Changes in mood and behavior. They can become aggressive, they can become depressed. Next slide. So how do we make a diagnosis? Now, as a GP, I find it very useful to have a good history from the informer, a family member who can tell me exactly what's going on. Because the person with dementia probably doesn't realize that they have a problem. They're probably oblivious of their memory loss. Any reduction in function from a previous level. So someone, for example, who is a mathematician in his professional life is now struggling with his finances. That is a reduction from his previous normal level. So that is worrying. Whereas someone who was not an educated person, who couldn't do finances, you'd expect that to be normal for them. Difficulty in performing day-to-day functions, day-to-day tasks, such as going shopping or going out on, for a walk and getting lost, wandering. So these are all things that we want to know. As a GP, I would perform a screening memory test, and I would also want to do a blood test to rule out other causes which might cause memory loss, such as a deficiency of vitamin B12 or folate or thyroid disturbance. Here, I would also want to find out about any alcohol or substance misuse. And then I would refer them to the memory clinic, where they would probably have a CT scan to make this diagnosis. Next slide. So, is it possible to live well with dementia? Yes, you shouldn't stop doing what you enjoy. Carry on with your normal day-to-day activities, keep healthy, try and reduce your risk factors, try and stop smoking, try and make sure that you exercise regularly, and carry on with your activities. In fact, a lot of these activities, such as music, art, are actually used as therapy to help patients with dementia. Next slide. So how can carers help these patients live well with dementia? Listen to them. Make sure that you take time to listen to them. Reduce distractions. So don't have a loud television when you're having a conversation with someone with dementia. And speak clearly. Make sure your body language matches with what you're trying to say. And use aids, visual aids, to help them. And overall, treat them with respect. Next slide. There is more to a person than dementia. If you ask anyone with dementia, they would say that they want their friends, their relatives, and their community to treat them in exactly the same way as they were in the past. Here, I think, Manish, you hit the nail on the head when you said that we need to raise awareness in our community, particularly the Asian community, where there is a lack of awareness and there is an ignorance about this condition. And we need to, and I really thank CAT8 for actually bringing this to the limelight and raising awareness in our community. Next slide. So I leave you with Dementia Friends, which is a fantastic resource, for carers of patients with dementia. Thank you. I pass over to Rajal now.
Hi, sorry, a little bit of a technical mute. Thanks, and great bits of information from Manish and Anuja. Thank you. So I wanted to put my sort of story into perspective of what we've already heard. From Manish already, we've had journey that he's gone through with his mum, and from Anuja's point, things that we need to make sure we're actually mindful of and considering when we're actually considering people with dementia. And it is very important that we raise this awareness and ensure that there isn't a stigma around the word dementia, and that we fully understand what it actually encompasses. And from our point, myself and Vivek, it's a very passionate focus that we have, because from the reasons why we've built our business, and it's one of the proudest things that we do as a family. And we thoroughly enjoy working with our friends and colleagues, and to bring all of these different ideas, things that are thrown up and things that we can think about differently, and basically creating a solution so it supports all of us in our lives. We all experience these events as informal carers and challenges, and sometimes we don't even recognize that we're actually acting as an informal carer with someone that may have dementia. And it's very important that, as Manish touched on, that in today's climate, we have our COVID crisis, there are challenges in the way we work from a workplace point of view and in home. So, there are a lot of stresses also from a family's point of view with those that have dementia. So this webinar, we hope that by sharing our stories, this helps in knowing that there is support and that there is help that we can all go to and access, and we make sure that we reach out to those available charity access. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just, reiterate the sort of 5 key messages that both Manish and Anuja have been talking about, and putting it into the context of my mum's journey today. Dementia is not a natural part of aging. My mum is 85, she's strong and healthy. And, it was never a point that we thought would be a diagnosis that mum would actually end up having. If we go on to the next point, dementia is caused by diseases of the brain. Yeah, and that's how, over a course of 5 years, when we sort of initially noticed some of the symptoms that Anuja picked on earlier, we sort of got curious that what is this, and sort of took GP advice and did some assessments. And, mum already understands that she has a form of dementia, and she's on medication, and she's very religious in remembering to take that medication, because she's understanding that it's supporting her. And, we talk about the fact that dementia is not losing your memory. Absolutely. If you talk to my mum, she'll always say to us, I haven't lost, I remember everything. And you sort of end up having a bit of a conversation, because that is one of the forms of the journey as the dementia progresses. There are symptoms of loss of memory. When she's gone shopping, she's actually had a moment where for 5-10 minutes she actually lost orientation of the shop that she was at, didn't quite know where she was, and ended up getting a little bit nervous. So it's these sort of things. She was coherent enough to come back home and let us know that happened, so we could take further action on that. So that was a real blessing for us. Next point. So we always say that it's always possible to live well with dementia. It's really how we tackle dementia that defines how well we live. And people with dementia, there are family members, and it's really the family that also pushes the support for the person. And she loves cooking, and we're always around her, and ensuring that she's getting the different opportunities that she really enjoys. And final point is essentially there is more to the person than dementia. Absolutely, I agree with that. When I see my mum, I see how proud she is. I see how proud she is to hear the stories of our children. And especially at the moment, we have a great story going on with all of our trials and tribulations about having a puppy coming into our home, which actually triggered a whole load of memories of her old memories being in Ginger, which brings a lot of laughter and smiles and conversations around the family. So there are lots of things that, you know, we can ensure that we do with those that, you know, are going through this journey. Next slide, please. So really, it's very important to ensure that we recognize the symptoms. And, you know, hopefully these seminars that today and next week helps us identify some of the key things that may just trigger a conversation. So this picture I've put really made me smile, because if we look at the lady, you know, she shows us that, you know, we can be the back support. You know, we are the watchful eye. And, you know, for mum, you know, she ended up having momentary lapses of remembering where they were and, you know, where she was, and losing track of time. Point 2. Oh, hello. Concentration was another big factor for mum, and you know, she was always being easily distracted. So these were another triggers for us. And then, you know, when we're having a conversation around, you know, would she like to go out, or would she like to, you know, just do an activity? There was always difficulty in trying to make decisions. And this isn't something that happened just in 1 month or 2 months. This was over a period of 2-3 years. We saw a gradual increase in difficulty in trying to make decisions, which was again a bit of a trigger of, should we actually get this checked out? Point 4, sorry. You know, other things like doing tasks and organizing tasks, and simple things like where you put things in your cupboard was you know, misplacing things in a cupboard. Point 5. Typically cooking, you know, my mom, you know, she's grown up with cooking, but, you know, we also saw, as Anuja mentioned earlier, certain memory lapses can also cause, you know, movements around the kitchen that you sort of forget what were you doing, and walking away from things. And these are things that essentially highlighted to us that actually we should consider and ensure that mum is getting the best support that she can. If we go on to the next slide, please. So in all of this, you know, one of the critical importance that we must place on people is we must know that, you know, we are all unique, and the individuals that have been diagnosed with dementia are all unique. You know, this lady, she's essentially, you know, getting a lot of pleasure out of something very simple. And each person, as we say, you know, will experience dementia in their own way. And how we respond to that person can greatly just affect how well that person is going to actually live with dementia. So interestingly enough, you know, we wanted to share that, you know, take a look at this next video, and you know, the individuals being, those with dementia being interviewed by kids.
Hello. Hello.
Give me 5.
How old are you?
I'm 60, I think.
Do you sometimes do silly things?
I put milk in the washing machine.
Do you still go out on dates?
On dates? No, I go to buy dates, but...
Left the house without any trousers. I know.
What was she like when he was a teenager?
Sometimes I was good, sometimes I wasn't. I had a lot of boyfriends.
Can you still kiss people when you have Alzheimer's?
Yes.
Did you dye your hair pink because you have dementia?
That's a very good question.
I love your hair. Do you know how babies are made? looks after you?
My wife, Vivian, the boss.
Do you ever get lonely?
Yes, I do. Very, very lonely. I'm on my own now, so I have to make the best of it.
I know that one day I'm going to wake up and not know who anyone is.
Do you have any life advice for me?
My advice would be,
Have you forgotten?
I have, yes.
Make sure you tell the people that you love them.
Treat every moment as though it's your last.
Stay away from boys.
It was nice talking to you.
So, you know, my takeout so far from what, you know, Manish, Anuja, you know, what we've heard and, you know, looking at the video, what we've seen, you know, it's really important to realize, you know, our individual uniqueness, you know, what makes us who we are. And we people living with dementia, it's very important for us to know the person. So, you know, this is me, forget me not. And I feel that, you know, we as a family always take time to chat with my mum, you know, understand her likes and dislikes. And these have constantly been changing over time. You know, mum was diagnosed with dementia at least, I would probably say 6 to 7 years ago. But if I look at how she was 6 years ago to where she is today, it's very different. So it's always important to continuously communicate and continuously understand the needs of that person. And we also make sure that we live in a joint family. You know, I'm blessed to be living in a joint family. So ensuring that even within our family, you know, individuals are fully part of the conversations, understanding how mum is, understanding her needs, and always ensuring that she always feels independent. And, you know, the best that we can, as safely as we can, because that's one thing that we don't want her to feel, that she has lost control. And you know, as Anuja mentioned in her section, that, you know, respect is very important for those individuals going through their journey. Next slide, and I'll hand over to Vivek.
Thanks, Mum. Yeah, it's been really interesting so far, and as well, again, thank you, Manish and Anuja, for your points earlier today. I really just wanted to give my own viewpoint of how I've kind of been brought into the situation when looking after my nanny and thinking about her dementia and how that's progressed over the last 6-7 years. And also generally how maybe it's affected me, but also how as a family we've had to deal with that situation. So just to get into the background a little bit. So again, as Mum just mentioned, it was 6-7 years ago when Nani was actually diagnosed for the first time with dementia. And of course, as a family, it was a shock to all of us. However, we've always been in a fortunate position that we're a very closely connected family. There's a lot of people nearby. I mean, she lives in a house with 5 other nannies and nannas all together, which is lovely and great because it keeps her active and keeps her kind of avoiding one of the key triggers and most difficult areas of dementia, which is loneliness, and something that can really affect an individual moving forward in their journey of dementia, as well as kind of lack of activity. So that's been amazingly positive for her. And actually, if you look at her where she was 6 years ago to today, as Mum said, it's changed a lot in terms of personality, but actually from a dementia progression point of view, it's not been too bad. She has now forgetting her short term, it's consistently more. However, generally her persona and everything is fairly similar and still very positive as she's always been. So that's been something that's great to see, and we're in a very fortunate position that we've been able to have that with her as well. But just to touch on a couple of things that I think are massively important about the way the situation is being dealt with is that it's always important to make sure that person thinks and feels and really believes that they are still independent and that they have everything to do for themselves. They have complete control for themselves. However, as a family, what we've been able to do in the background of that is just create a safety net around any kind of key risk factors that we think could be an issue, such as leaving the house by herself, going to the shops by herself, even something kind of as simple as just getting a little location tag that she can keep in her bag, or having kind of a mobile phone that she has Find My Friends on, allows us to feel a bit more comfortable in those situations as well. And just thinking generally about how she can remain active with everyone. And obviously she's cooking every day, and actually was one of the cooking was one of the things that made us notice that maybe dementia was actually setting in 6 or 7 years ago, because when she was cooking, not that it was a problem, but she kept forgetting to put salt in the food. And for the family, that was fine, because it's better that they're not eating salt. But actually, it gave us kind of some trigger points saying this has happened very often. And actually, maybe she'll forget to put some key ingredients in the food. And as someone that's cooked for 50, 60, 70 years of her life, to then just suddenly forget key areas of the process of cooking was a key risk factor for us. And as Anuja said, that's to do with the sequencing and actually someone being able to go through regular steps and doing that easily. So just again, these are just some few triggers that maybe as a family that you might start noticing of an individual, an elderly grandparent or parent. And it's just some things to flag and to be aware of if these situations do come about. But what I wanted to actually get into a bit more kind of understanding is looking at what does someone with dementia, kind of how are they affected personally? So not thinking about it from a scientific point of view, but actually just from a more emotional and general point of view of how they can then deal with their life. So I've got this analogy, which is on the screen at the minute, and it's called the bookcase analogy. So the way you can think of it is, there's a bookcase, and imagine I am an 80-year-old individual who is suffering from dementia. Inside of me is a bookcase. At the very top, there's all my recent memories, maybe what I ate for lunch, what I did last night, how I went for a shower this morning, whatever it might be. And then right at the bottom at my feet are all of my childhood memories. These are things that maybe I remember from when I was growing up, like Rajal, Mum had mentioned about my nanny kind of remembering the things around the dog when she was younger and Ginger and things like that. These are the childhood memories. So coming up to the body is kind of getting more recent. So if you just go to the next slide. Imagine I'm then that individual and someone has just stood there and just shaking me a lot. What would happen is the books in the top of my body, so these are the recent memories such as what I ate yesterday, when I went to the shops, etc. These things fall out. And these are basically memories, more short-term memories that I end up forgetting more often. So what ends up happening is I'm remembering things from my younger days. And actually what can occur is that I'm actually living my life in the way that I remembered, because what I think is a recent memory might have actually happened 20 years ago when I actually have late stage dementia. So this could be something as simple as if you're in the kitchen and you're having to put the kettle on. Maybe 20 or 30 years ago, there weren't electric kettles and you would have actually put a kettle on the hob. So what could happen is, in the case that you're then this 80-year-old having to put tea on, you put the kettle on, but instead of putting it on the electric plate, you put it on the hob and think that that's the correct place for it to be. So this is just something that can end up happening really easily. And as a family, you don't necessarily know that this is what the person is thinking. Me as a young grandchild, I'm going to go into the kitchen, see that my nanny's put the electric kettle on the gas hob and get really, really worried and panic and say you're not allowed to make the tea anymore, when actually that's probably not the best approach to dealing with that situation. What we should recognize is, what is the reason that she put the kettle on the hob? Is it because she's thinking, back in my 20s, I always put the kettle on the hob, so that's where I'm going to put it. In which case, maybe it's a better solution to get a hob for the kettle, knowing that that's something that actually she is going to probably do more often than not, because that's just where the stage of her memory is. And there's so many kind of solutions now in the market, which I think are amazing. I don't know if anyone on this webinar has actually seen them or researched them, but there's a huge number of companies who are trying to recreate kind of the times of the 60s or the 70s or the 80s in people's homes that are suffering with dementia, because actually that's a place where they feel really comfortable. Whereas if they're in a new home with lots of gadgets, all of this kind of technology everywhere, and they don't necessarily understand how to use it, it can then become really difficult for them to manage that home environment. So again, it's thinking about how are you making that individual feel comfortable and happy and allowing them to still remain independent with what works for them. So if we go to the next slide, one other thing to note is there's two elements of your memory, if I'm talking about it from a very basic place. So you've got one, which is your factual memory. So again, this is when I went to the shops earlier, what did I buy? How much money did I spend? Things like that. And then you've got your emotional memories. And these are things, so for every factual memory, you'll have a link of an emotional memory that you'll then have. So for example, I went to the shops earlier and my emotion was that I was really happy because I got to go outside in the sun. It was really nice to go for a walk, and I bought some really good food that I get to make later. So that's my link between factual and emotional. What ends up happening in someone that has dementia is they don't necessarily forget the emotion. So they might forget what they did. I've forgotten that I went to the shop, but I remember that I'm happy and that I'm feeling good, and that whatever I did in my day, I forgot what it was, but actually I'm feeling good. And that's a good way to kind of be. So what I'm trying to get at here is just having that recognition as well. So to give you another example, if you go to the next slide again, what might have happened is me as someone with dementia, I've gone with my family to the beach, and I've, in my mind, really wanted to have some ice cream because I know I love ice cream and these are the things that I want to do. So I've had my ice cream and it's made me feel great. However, when I'm on my way home or when I've got back home, I completely forgot that I had any ice cream. So that, as a short-term recent memory at the top of my bookcase, has fallen out. And actually, I don't remember that situation anymore. But what's not fallen out is the emotion around me having that ice cream and being on the beach and having a lovely day with the family. So this is, again, just to note that although when you're speaking maybe to a loved one that has dementia and is constantly forgetting things and doesn't remember where they put their keys or their phone or all these other things that happen very regularly, it's not to forget that that person is still feeling the emotions of what happened in the past. It could be positive, it could be negative. So you might think someone is being really sad and upset and angry, when actually it's because of an emotion of something that's happened. And they might not remember what's happened, so they can't explain that situation to you, but they're still feeling that emotion. So it's the ability to be able to recognize those situations and help that person, not remembering what they did, but then supporting that emotion that they're feeling, because they will continually feel that. So this is just, I just wanted to kind of put that in a really simple way. And I hope that's made sense, just in terms of how someone might be personally who has dementia having to deal with their own situation. They're forgetting lots of stuff, but they're feeling lots of stuff. And as a situation, even if you think about if you were in that situation, how confusing would that be? So that's where things like frustration end up coming in, especially if it's a negative emotion and they're feeling down and then they're frustrated because they don't know why they're feeling down. And that's kind of a bit of a cycle that can occur. So just wanted to highlight that for everyone. Again, if there's any questions at the end, feel free, or of course, as you guys are all putting in the chat, feel free to ask any questions. But yeah, I'd like to just hand off to the next, Manish, I believe.
Thank you, Vivek. That was truly great. And I think the bookcase analogy is a great one to illustrate exactly the point. And I think this is at the essence of it, isn't it? Which Rajal, you touched upon. Treat the person as a person. Just because they've got dementia doesn't really detract from the fact that they are a person. And the emotional aspect is something which is so often sort of forgotten because the person is not remembering the actual events that you've done with that person. However, don't forget how you make them feel. And I think that's if there's one thing to take away from this webinar is that, when you meet somebody with dementia, just always think about how you make them feel, because that emotion lingers on and it's not something which is going to go away. Whereas the actual event of you meeting that person may go away because it's a recent short-term memory. So that emotional connection is so important. And ultimately, as human beings, we're emotional beings. And it's something with something which we just really need to kind of make sure we focus on when it comes to dementia. Right, so we are coming to the end of the webinar, and Nirmal, can you go to the next slide, please? So a quick activity, just so that we can get an indication of how you think about this. So how many steps do you think are involved in making a cup of tea? So again, put it in your chat box, A, B, C, D, or E, Nirmal and the others will collate all of this, and we'll put a straw poll together in terms of how people are thinking about this. So if you can put that into the chat now, that would be really helpful, and we can get an idea of what people are thinking about. Good, keep that coming. I'll just give you another few seconds, and we can, whilst you're sort of doing that, I'll just share a couple of other sort of snippets. What Rajal, you touched on with your mum. We went through exactly the same type of thing with her cooking, which was, she was an excellent cook, and that started changing, and that's how we started picking up some of the symptoms. So there are so many clues that we have with somebody with dementia. However, we need to have that awareness in order to have that mind of talking to a GP or somebody else. Right, okay, so, okay, that's great. Thank you very much, keep it coming. Nirmal, let's go to the next slide. So the correct answer, well, if you have some dementia, generally there are about more than 30 steps in order to make a cup of tea. Most of these steps are things that we take for granted. However, if you break it down into its very simplistic steps, just the act of actually thinking about a cup of tea, and then thinking about where can I make a cup of tea? So walk into the kitchen, the movement, where are the cups located? Where are the tea bags? What are the steps involved in making the cup of tea? Do I take hot water, cold water? Again, there's logic about that, the sequencing of that, and how things are located within the kitchen. So again, what we see with people with dementia, you have labeling within the kitchen, so that, again, back to Vivek's point and Rajal's point about being independent, the person with dementia is able to be independent in how they go about things. But again, it's just an illustration that what we take for granted, what some of the things that we think are fairly simple because implicitly we do not think about many of these things. Somebody with dementia, back to the bookcase, because they've lost some of those memories. Also what Anuja was talking about in terms of how the brain works, those particular aspects of the brain have been impaired, and as a result of which you get the situation whereby you don't really know how to make a cup of tea, or you get it wrong. So that's where patience is clearly absolutely important. So we talked about my mum earlier. Sadly, there was no cure for her, and with dementia, there isn't a cure. There are many pharmaceutical companies working on a cure. Sadly, there have been many setbacks over the years, but that's why it's even more important that we help manage this condition and help people live well with dementia as well as they can do, because it is a progressive condition, it's a progressive disease. So really the way I think about it is dementia, where we need to change perception, is how cancer was perhaps 20, 30 years ago, where we used to think about cancer as that taboo sort of subject nobody really talked about. Nowadays, we talk about that all the time. In a similar fashion, I think if more of us talk about dementia, more of us share some of these issues that we are facing as carers or as somebody who is suffering from dementia or is affected by dementia, then hopefully we can raise that awareness. sadly, statistically, 1 in 3 of us will be affected by dementia, which is quite a stark statistic in itself, and that keeps me motivated to volunteer and keep doing what I'm doing at the moment, because if it is me, then I want to make sure that things are sort of set up, if I do get it eventually. But hopefully it doesn't happen. But there are lots of things that we can think about to prevent dementia, and some of those things we'll cover in the next session. So what next? I think you may be thinking about. So we talk about Dementia Friends. There's a Dementia Friends webinar we've done today. So do something simple. Take some time tomorrow. Take some time today. Somebody you are living with dementia, or somebody who who's got dementia. Get in touch with them. Talk to them. Spend time with them. And you can take any of these actions. Nothing is too small or too big. Volunteer, donate, and sign up to Arts and Society so that we can continue with this with other people. Nirma, can you put forward? Take the next slide, please. Forward, yeah, and one again. So here I've just put up some resources here. So I've said the Arts and Society has a lot of resources. So the website is a great tool. There is this particular local resources aspect. So if you're going to find support near you, put in your postcode and it will bring up what are the local resources near you. Donating is clearly important, because we are a charity and we need funds in order to make sure that people with dementia are supported, especially through this COVID crisis and going forward, because again, all charities are experiencing great financial difficulties. The Dementia Support Connect line is also available for help. So if you are at a loss, if you want to talk to somebody, there is a number you can dial. There is lots of other information. What I will encourage you to do is also sign up to become a dementia friend, get your friends, colleagues involved, and create a dementia-friendly community. That's the objective behind this. So next slide, if you can. Nirmal. So next time round, we will cover these particular topics. I'll leave them there. So on behalf of myself, Rajal, Vivek, Anuja, thank you very much for taking the time to participate in all of this. And well, if you have enjoyed this, put those comments on the YouTube comment box when this is posted to YouTube. Continue with the questions. We're going to go into Q&A now. And if there are any burning questions that you may have, again, it may help us to navigate next week's session, and just to make sure that we include some of those things within that. But I'll pass on to Rumit for closing remarks and pulling out the questions that we can hopefully answer in this session or next session. Thank you.